and welcome to another episode of The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. I am your host, Blaine Bartlett. Folks, we've got a very, I think almost a little bit different and unique take on the soul of business today. Something came across in my email that really intrigued me. And I was just talking to our guests, and I've got two of them here for us today. But I was talking to our guests just prior to pushing record, and about a meditation labyrinth that I set up here on the property years ago. And it was set up according to something that's known as sacred geometry. And there's a whole epistemology of information that informs how actually nature works, that can be unbundled through numbers, through angles, through any number of different things, degrees, atoms, frequencies, planetary movements. All of this stuff kind of conspires to create an experience in life. And the title of the show is The Soul of Business, and that experience for me has to do with the way that the soul of anything, and everything has a soul in my view, how it gets expressed in life. What constrains it, what enables it. And there's a lot of constraint in the world today around the fulsome expression of soul. And when I'm talking about that, I have to actually reference the fact, and this is a bias of mine, everything is connected in some way, shape, or form. And this is where the soul of business actually, for me, comes into play here. Business is connected to everything. There's nothing in life that isn't touched by the activities of business in some way, shape, or form. And being mindful of that, I think, is incumbent on every leader in every business, every owner in every business, every employee in every business, and every consumer of every business to look at the quality of that connection. And the guests that I have today, Gail and Gregory Hoag, have got a book out. And it's, and I want to say it's a capstone book, but it's more than that. They've been working in this field for over 40 years. Just looking at just this sort of linkage. The book is titled Sacred Geometry, and the subtitle is The Universal Language of Divine Alignment. And what I know about the way that life works is when it works with elegance. And in my language here, elegance has to do with minimal to no unintended consequences. There's always alignment in play. So, Gregory, Gail, I want to welcome you to the show. I'm looking forward to this conversation. So, let me just start by probably a very simple question here before I ask the question, the soul of business. But can you define the term sacred geometry for our listeners?
Well, I'm going to start out because I'm going to keep it simple. And you touched on it beautifully, Blaine, that sacred geometry is really about understanding how everything in creation is here, how we go from energy, pure raw energy, everything's energy. And so this amorphous, unmanifested energy needs to find a way into this physical domain in a way that's very structured, very dependable, so that we know that it's going to happen over and over again. And so we're all related through that, the way the cells of our body work, the way that nature is created. Everything has a certain rhythm, pattern, structure, and that is expressed through sacred geometry.
Okay. And go ahead, Gregory. Yeah.
I wasn't sure how I was going to add to it. It's just that we bounce back and forth, and sacred geometry, as Gail was saying, it really defines everything in universe and also everything in the subtle dimensions. Because when you were speaking to the fact of things get in the way, things block that connection to soul, and That's on the higher dimensional levels, and we are multi-dimensional beings. So there's order and structure to the higher dimensional aspects of us, the way our emotional body works, the way our mental body works, all the way up to soul itself. If we are going to bring a connection of our soul to bear in our life, in the way we express it in the world as a full, complete human being, we need to start to resonate with some of those higher dimensional levels as well. And that helps us dismiss some of the impediments that go on, especially in our world with the toxins, all the negative emotions, they block that higher self.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to do that, that's what we've expressed in our book on sacred geometry, is basically, this is the way universe is doing it. This is the way numbers work. And if we want to, as human beings, be in rhythm, be in the flow of the way universe is doing it, we need to incorporate some of this knowledge, some of these actual physical constructs, like what I have next to me, which in the little one it's cut off. Bottom line, we need to bring more of that understanding into our lives so that we can be in rhythm with the universe.
Well, and I love that. Thank you for the exploration on that and the exposition of that. I want to apply this to, kind of topically, the focus of this show, which is, that underlying spirit that informs the business's activities. When you hear the term the soul of business, from the perspective that you two occupy, what does this evoke for you? Tapping into the soul of business.
Well, it's interesting, Blaine. A number of years ago, maybe this goes back, 20 plus years, 25 years ago, I was doing business consulting and had created a model that was based on as above, so below, and looking at everything structurally and saying that the business has a soul. Well, this was a pretty radical statement back 25 years ago. And if you can look at that and say, well, what is that soul expressing? What is the purpose of it? What are the values? What are the intrinsic qualities that are being expressed by this business? How can it be an entity that really can move on in a purposeful way? And so when I think about the soul of business, I really think that is what fleshes it out. That's what gives it life. When the soul departs from the body, there is no more life in this physical structure, right? And so it is, I believe, with business too. If
Yes.
the soul isn't coming through in the business, then it could be that there's incredible chaos, struggle, things aren't really hitting the mark. And yet when that purpose is identified with, and not only identified, but the people who work in the business really give credence to it. They can live with it. In fact, they have an understanding of it where they feel the purpose as well. That's when things really start to work.
Yeah.
And the other piece, looking at it from another perspective, is that we spend so much of our time in our work life, all through our lives. And we're kind of in a time now where, people are staying in business longer and longer.
Yep.
And doesn't it make sense that it should be a vehicle for the expression of our souls, for our purpose, for our higher self, for our intuition and creativity to be active and to also be compensated for?
Mm-hmm.
So, I think it's a very, very important thing.
The idea of that, and I like, I'm going to come back to this notion of alignment. An alignment, there's resonance that kind of occurs here when, say, an employee, and I'll use the label very loosely here, but anybody that wants to go to work for my company or my firm, or be associated in a compensational way. What's the resonance? Why my firm? Why not somebody else? There's got, they're typically, if we take out the monetary compensation, that sort of thing from the equation, why would I come to work with you? Why would I want to be part of what it is that you say we're actually going to market? Creating that sense of alignment, I think, is probably the major challenge, and if it's done successfully, the major leverage point and competitive advantage for any business leader on the planet. So with that as kind of a preface, using sacred geometry, how do we begin to attract employees and retain employees that are aligned with who we are as a business?
Let me go for that one.
The aspect of sacred geometry that I think is, or one of the aspects that's so remarkable, is that you start to see how different things like miles, like I was telling you before the show started, how the miles of diameter of the Earth plus the miles of diameter of the moon added together and turned into degrees creates a particular geometry. It's this geometry right here. And this geometry is also working with something called the phi ratio, which is the way the body is constructed. Using these calibers, I can measure the first digit of my finger to my whole finger, my hand to my elbow. All of the aspects of the body are connected, and across different measurements, different ways of calibrating. So what that's starting to show us is how everything is connected. And thus, I think what that boils down to for any good business entrepreneur is to embody how they can be of the highest service to all, because we are all connected. We may not see that, but if we start along the premise of I'm here to be of service to everyone, and that's including of service to myself. So in that order, I need to have the right compensation. I need to have the right pricing. I need to work with things that feel fair from my side, from the other side that's received. So, ultimately, I think each one of us, in grabbing on to our sole purpose and expressing that in a way that I can make a living, or each of us can make a living from it, it becomes the soul of our business. And the main focus of that business is ultimately to be of service and to hear what the market is sharing and what others are sharing, and how can we take care of them in a full, fair way. Mm-hmm. And sacred geometry is a good teacher for that. And not only is a good teacher, when I have that incorporated into my environment, it allows me to feel connected and me to feel good, and for me to feel that love that's coming from inside first before I start going outwards. Too quickly, we go out for the love, for the support, for whatever, but it needs to be found inside first. And then there's resonance with when the truth shows up on the outside.
Yeah, that is so in alignment with a couple of things. One, I think the purpose of business is to enhance the likelihood of thriving on this planet. I mean, that's the purpose of business. I'll make money if I'm doing that well, and I need money to stay in business. So I don't want to get the cart in front of the horse. I want to actually have the horse in the right position here. Yeah, so that notion of being of service. But you also talk about, and this I'm very interested in your take on this, both of you. Um, I spent 40 plus years working with leadership and leadership development. Um, that's been basically what my company, when I founded it in '87. Everything that we've done for the last 40 years has been organized around leadership development, and the premise is that leadership is an inside out process. I can't lead effectively unless I'm others effectively unless I'm leading myself effectively.
Mm.
So this notion of internal connection, yeah, hand, heart, mouth. I mean, everything gets connected here. It's all bespoke in one sense here. If I was going to be using a background in sacred geometry, and I don't pretend that I have one here, I'm familiar with some of the concepts, but I certainly am not schooled in it. If I was coaching or consulting with a leader, and I was using that epistemology as as kind of a filter for me, how would I go about working with a leader to begin the process of connecting the dots? I guess is what I would look at here, so that the inside begins to be a catalytic component of what I'm manifesting externally as a leader and as a business. How would how would I pragmatically, how would I use sacred geometry in conversation with a client?
Well, it's more than sacred geometry. Well, it includes sacred geometry,
Yes.
but I think that our education system, and from the time I think many of us were imprinted with what it means to be a human being, it was very much related to be a certain thing.
Yep.
What do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to do by going to college? What are you going to study so that you have a profession or you have, some expertise? And what that essentially does is it pigeonholes people. It puts them into boxes, right? It doesn't incorporate the soul of the person. It doesn't incorporate their creativity, their intuition, what inspires them, what they love, what they dream of. And the truth is, I think that we've learned for the number of years now that the more that we have people in our businesses that can really express their genius, everybody benefits, right? It feels great to the person who's contributing.
Yeah.
And then to hopefully the team that can work with this kind of interaction. There's so much more. The synergy really just blossoms. So I think that, we have to really look at what does it really mean for the whole person to show up as a leader, as an employee, as a consumer. I think we all long to show up fully. We all want to be recognized. We want to be heard. We want to be appreciated. And so the more we can change our filters so that we are presenting ourselves in a different way, the better it is.
Mm-hmm.
And, their education can be something that supports that, as opposed to the education trying to confine who we really are.
Yeah.
So we talk a lot about being a multidimensional being.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that some people may not fully understand that. So what I mean by that is that we are more than what meets the eye. We are, that person who, when we listen to ourselves, when we take those mindful moments so that we're not just reacting to something, but instead we're doing it from a place of being centered. And then the conversations are totally different, right? And so, I think that's what's really essential, and what many young people, I think, are really wanting in their positions things in their jobs and their businesses is to be able to feel like today I did something that really felt good. I made a difference.
I made a difference. Yeah.
I made a difference.
Yeah. I was seen and I made a difference. That notion of, there's almost a playfulness that I think gets activated in my experience when people are really, being able to do what makes a difference to them, where they feel like, this was worth getting out of bed this morning. There's a playfulness that kind of comes into play here, and I look at both of you, and there's a lot of smiling going on and whatnot. We're going to take a real quick break here. When we come back from the break, I want to kind of leave the archaic business conversation behind a little bit here, and I want to kind of play a little bit, if you wouldn't mind, with some of the ways that sacred geometry actually manifests itself, in the universe. I mean, you talked about diameters of the Earth and the Moon and whatnot. I am fascinated by these correlations because they are to me just incredibly elegant in the ways that they show up, the ways that they manifest. So if you don't mind, that's kind of where we'll play when we come back.
Sounds great.
Let's
Okay.
do it.
Folks, we'll be right back, and stay tuned. The nature of life is evidenced in nature. Nature grows, and all of nature honors the desire to be more, to have more, and to do more. Life thrives when it's allowed to grow. And ideally, thriving is what we also, all of us, want to be able to do. Unfortunately, at some stage in life, most people find themselves settling into what I can only call a rut. And a rut is nothing more than a coffin with the ends kicked out. You want to quickly get out of any rut that you find yourself in. When you stop growing, that's when the coffin starts to appear. The simple truth is this, and this is true for everything in nature. You're going to die. I'm going to die. Every one of us dies. So the question we need to come to grips with is not, are we going to die? The question nature asks us to answer is, are we truly living? That's what motivation is about. It's the desire to move. It's the desire to grow and to excel. Have I lived? How have I lived? I'd love for you to take advantage of my Leadership Mindset Masterclass. It's all about providing you with the tools to ensure thriving for yourself and for those around you. Register today to receive the free introduction video and find out more about this acclaimed program. You'll also receive a copy of my international #1 bestseller, Compassionate Capitalism, A Journey to the Soul of Business. I'm Blaine Bartlett, and I look forward to helping you thrive. Welcome back, folks. Before we took the break, I made a comment about being playful, about not in a frivolous way, but I want to play with this notion of sacred geometry a bit. And while we were gone, Gregory, you mentioned something that I said, let's hold that because I want to begin this next part of the interview with that statement. So can you articulate that again, please?
What I was saying was that it's easy to go to some of the obscure questions and answer them because everything that we do with sacred geometry applies to everything that is. I mean, it literally has a reflection on all aspects of creation. When we talk about it on the subtitle of our book, a universal language, that means all the things we're searching for, all the things we're trying to figure out and put together, there can be an understanding provided through sacred geometry, both in the way the human body is constructed, the way the subtle bodies are constructed. For example, we talk about the emotional body, we feel that, and yet there are some people that can see what we call auras, energy around the physical body. And that energy lights up in colors that reflect what's going on with the body emotionally. So what that means is when we were talking about multi-dimensions, there's a dimension that's invisible to most of us. Some people are starting to see that dimension on the fourth level where colors show up for the emotional body. And colors also show up around what's going on inside the physical body as far as health. Shadows or stream flows. And then you can go to other emotional or dimensional levels where the mind hangs out and where sometimes some people can tune into what's going to be happening. So that means to me that that's a dimensional level where time starts to stretch, starts to bend. What we consider to be time is not necessarily anything real, because it can be manipulated. And as a matter of fact, when we go into our book, a great deal of it reflects how geometry is a reflection of time. And so I can show you the 60-second cycle that shows up in all kinds of geometries, that shows up in the diameter of the sun, the moon, and the earth. And it all relates to time. Like the diameter of the moon itself relates to 2,160 miles, equated to 2,160 years, is the time of one of the ages where we're just moving into Aquarius out of Pisces right now. Each one of these ages lasts the same number of years as the moon has in diameter. And if you want to look at that as a geometry, it's the same number of degrees that are on the face of a cube. Each, 6 faces, and each of those faces, you have 4 corners of 90 degrees, and all of a sudden it's 360 times 6 is 2,160. It's like everything starts fitting together, and we can do that dance.
There's a
and apply
symmetry
it
to everything.
all the different aspects of our beingness.
There we go. That's beautiful.
Okay.
Yeah.
So all these correlations, all these relationships are really important, particularly since, the way that a lot of people are experiencing their life right now is in a way that portends a lot of separation, a lot of fear, a lot of lack of trust. And I think that there's a lot of pain around that. I mean, certainly we're seeing that there's an awful lot of people that are suffering because they don't feel that sense of belonging. And one of the things that I love that is very clear in our book, and we talk a lot, by the way, about consciousness as well in the book, we really show people in the way that everything is connected and everything is developed in such a way that it's something that you can it's tangible, you can hold on to it. It's not just this random crazy stuff that's going on. And knowing that helps people find their place.
Yes.
And then we can look at this whole life as a way that we are co-creating so that our souls can come through and can express that light, that genius, that love. And the more that we do that, we're implanting that into this physical domain. So more and more stuff becomes more beautiful. It works better when we talk about that fluidity, that resonance. That resonance, everything is really, when you get down to it, it's all based on resonance.
Yeah.
So when we understand the way that the sun and the moon and the earth and everything is created, there's a resonance. So we can allow ourselves to be in sync with that, as opposed to being in a place where we're going, what's going on here?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it gives us a lot of important foundation.
And I think that foundational quality is really one of the things that we can pay attention to, because it's it's palpable. And you mentioned separation. Anything that I can do in my life to experience more connection begins to reduce the pain of separation. I think that's where suffering comes from. I mean, if I go back to Buddhistic philosophy, it comes from the experience of being separated from the whole. And not attachment. I think we've got that wrong. I don't think suffering comes from attachment. It comes from the experience of separation. And the idea of sacred geometry here, and I want to disabuse people that are listening right now of anything that you might be considering about it being woo-woo or kind of weird. It's not. This is the way that the universe is put together. The universe is put together with symmetry. I mean, it truly is. I mean, if I've got this number, correct me, and I would imagine that you are familiar with, but the speed of light, when you actually take the numerical equivalent of the speed of light, and I forget what it is, it's but you break that down into degrees of latitude, and you end up basically with where the pyramids are located. It's a geospatial algorithm, and it's not an accident in the way that things are put together. The idea that everything is connected in some way, shape, or form. You look at a leaf and you start expanding it out, and the same patterns emerge over and over and over and over again. There's a patterned way that the universe is actually wired, whether it's through frequency or form. It all shows up.
Yeah.
Folks, as you're listening to this, I want you to get a copy of this book. But just as a kind of a toe in the water move here, Gregory and Gail, you've got a chapter available on the book, if I'm not mistaken here. Where can people find out more about this?
They can get it at this link. It's I connect the number 2 all ALL. So it's iconnectall.com/chapter. And we invite you to check it out and get that chapter. The chapter actually is talking about consciousness. The consciousness in relationship to sacred geometry. So I think it's a great way to get started. And I love what you said before, Blaine, about this whole thing about connection, because we completely agree with you that what people are suffering from is disconnection. And when we're disconnected, our bodies don't work, our lives don't work. We get into places of fear and separation instead of unity. And so sacred geometry, because intrinsically what it's about, brings us back to being in sync and connected. And so we've developed all kinds of different tools over these last 40 years to support that connection. Everything from pendants that we wear all the time that have all these different antenna systems in it and work with all these sacred geometric principles. And they're very beautiful as well. And what they do is they support us in maintaining the connections, because we have so much outside of us that is distracting us from those connections. So, we have everything that we've developed in these years has been to offer people a better way of connecting.
And I wanted to speak to, where the word attachment comes in, is attachment to things on the physical that are going to break, get old, die, all this stuff on the outside. So what you're really speaking to in the whole premise of what you're offering with your program is what is the undying aspect of a business what is the undying aspect of a human being? That is the soul. That's where you go for true connection. And when you come from that place, then everything is going to be a more pure expression of the truth that we all are. And as Gail was saying, these pendants can help us stay connected to that higher aspect. So the stuff on the outside, either the attachments or the sense of separation, all those things that bring pain, that's all the impermanent exterior stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so that interior connection is important. And I wanted to speak to you bringing up the metaphor about light. Well, it's more than a metaphor. It was a geometry, and you were talking about that. But recently, two Polish scientists discovered that the essence of what is light, the whole electromagnetic spectrum, it's all the energy is carried by a photon. And the photon has a geometry. They actually imaged it, these two scientists. And it turns out, when I saw it, I went, oh, this is a geometry known as a stellated octahedron or a star tetrahedron. And if you add up the degrees on its surface, there's 4,320 degrees. And it so happens that the radius of the sun that produces these photons is 432,000 miles. Same number, just on a different magnitude. And if you take that number, 432, and square it times itself, you get 186,600 and some miles per second within 0.02% of what Einstein postulated would be the exact speed of light. So this is the way light is working. This is the way the energy spectrum is working. And today, you may have heard there's some discussion as to music turning middle A into 432 hertz versus 440 hertz. And I'm a proponent for 432 because then when we're working with music, we have total choice of what we want to make the frequencies, what we want to make the sounds like. But if we are following 432 for middle A, then that means the music is starting to be harmonic with the way light works, the way energy works, the way the sun works. It's like that's what we mean by stepping in time with universal principles rather than saying, I can do whatever I want to do. I'm going to make it 440 or 441 just to make it easier for whatever.
432 works for me. Thank you for sharing that. My gosh, I mean, I got chills as you were talking about that. The synchronicity, the way that things work. It was either Aristotle or Thomas Troward. I'm not sure which one. Troward was a Scottish jurist here, but yeah, the idea of being able to experience beauty, to actually apprehend beauty. You're not looking at a thing, you're actually experiencing the soul, the frequency that gives it form. And that's light. I mean, there's a lightness to that. There's a lightness to being able to think that way. And in this conversation, I want to just thank the two of you for bringing not only some factual information, but a lot of light to what it is that we're doing. You are greatly appreciated. Truly. I want to thank you for taking the time. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sitting with me. We've gone over the time that I usually will work with because this has been fascinating to me. And I get to make that choice. So there.
We're playing together. Love it.
Absolutely. Good. Folks, you've been listening to The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. Obviously, I'm Blaine. But Gregory and Gail Hoag has been my guest today. I hope you have found this as fascinating as I have. Get a copy of their book, Sacred Geometry, The Universal Language of Divine Enlightenment. And as always, my admonition to you is go out into your life and find a way to be a center of distribution rather than a center of accumulation. You'll find that your life works a whole lot better when you're giving things away, including who you are. So the who you are that you give away makes a big difference in the experience that people have of living on this planet. Take care, and we'll see you on the next episode.